Good morning. I have been given this topic, recipient immunophenotype and donor matching for liver transplant outcome. So I'll divide my talk in three parts. First, flow cytometry, which is the integral part for immunophenotyping, and something about immune cells related to liver transplant. What are the clinical uses of immunophenotyping, and donor and recipient matching. So I will not be going around rejection and tolerance. The topic is for next week, and for residents, the immunophenotyping is defined as analysis of heterogeneous population of cells for purpose of identifying the presence and proportion of various populations of interest. Antibodies are used to identify cells by detecting specific antigens, and flow cytometry is the method of choice for this. This is a typical flow cytometer, and this is how it works. So it has a light source, a flow chamber, optical system, light detectors, and a computer which analyzes the findings. So laser light is given to the chamber, and those which are dyed, the cells which are dyed, they scatter the light and produce fluorescence, which is detected by the computer. Then further analysis is done. So this is a typical cell where a fluorochrome has been attached. So coming to location and distribution of liver immune cells. Liver is an immunoprivileged organ, and the distribution and microenvironment plays a big role in producing tolerance. So in brief, there are three compartments: the hepatocytes, the space of discs, and the sinusoids. And these are the sinusoidal endothelial cells. So most of the cells are inside this space, like T cells, NKT cells, further types of T cells, and dendritic cells. Stellate cells normally reside in the space of disc, and these are the hepatocytes. So I will briefly talk about the functions. This table is very busy. Just want to show you that there are various liver immune cells present in the liver, which have a specific marker, which can be detected by flow cytometry, and immunophenotyping are done. And they have specific roles. These roles keep on evolving as further studies come. Sometimes they become tolerant, sometimes they become rejecting. So this is a very dynamic field of research. So most of the focus is on T cells. The effector T cell lymphocytes are of three types: cytotoxic T cells, helper T cells, and regulatory T cells. And they are further subdivided into cytotoxic type 1 and 2, and Th1, Th2, and Th17 with their specific functions. Most of the times the Th2 is and T regulatory. Most important is T regulatory. So they are immunoinhibitory, but Th1 and Th17 are they enhance the immune response. And the native T cells, I know it's CD4 plus and CD8 plus cells with various markers. So these markers can differentiate between an effector T cell and naive T cells. Now just to enumerate, these are the types of CD4 T cells, CD8 T cells, and gamma delta T cells. Now coming to clinical use, I just went through in brief because my topic is not related to rejection and tolerance, where these things become much more important. So I will directly come to what is the clinical use of immunophenotyping in liver transplantation at this time point. So this was a thesis performed in microbiology by Dr. Arvind and Dr. Ekta. I was also a co-guide. So the topic was role of cytomegalovirus specific cell mediated immunity in monitoring CMV infection among live donor liver transplant. So the problem with cytomegalovirus is most of the it is there, it always reactivates, and problem is the treatment is based on the DNA of virus found in the cells, if I have found in the blood, and there is no way one can understand what is the immune profile of the patient against the infection. So there were some papers previously. This was a very good research, and it used a quantiferon CMV assay where the CD8 cells with CMV epitopes are caught, and a semi-quantitative ELISA is done to look for the interferon gamma. And the 30 patients were enrolled, and this is a commercial based assay which gives whether the CMV related immunity is present or absent. So when CMV immunity was negative, means the patient was not immune to CMV, then the incidence of CMV anemia was 58%. But those who had a cell-mediated immunity against CMV, the presence of DNA in the blood was 15%, and that was statistically significant. That's a very important finding because these samples were taken even before the transplant. So beforehand, one can predict whether the patient is going to have a CMV reactivation or not. Another important finding was those who had CMV immunity was present, the time for DNA clearance was shorter, and those in which it was absent, the DNA clearance took longer to subside. So that is a very important thing because the strategy we use for CMV is a preemptive strategy where a weekly CMV DNA is done. So this cell-mediated immunity can guide whether in some of the patient we should give prophylaxis or not. That is a very big question in CMV management and becomes more important our set of patients because almost 50%, 30% will have CMV reactivation at some time point. So there was a similar study published in American Journal of Transplantation where a cell-mediated immunity was against CMV was seen. And as you can see, as those in which the cell-mediated immunity was absent, there was less freedom from recurrence of CMV, the red line. Now coming to whether we can know whether a patient is going to have infection post-transplant, so that we can modulate his immunosuppression preemptively. It's a very difficult question to answer. Very few studies are there, but it was related to immunophenotyping, so I have included it. And what they did, this is again a commercial assay called ImmunoKnow, and here they can give whether a patient has immunity against infection on the basis of presence of immune response ATP. And what they found there, that those in which the immune response ATP was higher, they had less infection. 66 patients were enrolled, 28 had infections, and 38 did not have infection. They took samples at multiple time points, and it was even before detection of infection. So again, preemptively, one can know whether to modulate someone's immunosuppression. Now coming to other important thing in pediatric transplant, that is Epstein-Barr virus. Problem with pediatric population is the seroconversion generally occurs later compared to CMV, and so they are more susceptible to EBV infection, not reactivation infection, and eventually they may progress to post-transplant lymphoproliferative disorder. I will telling about it later on. So the incidence is 2 to 3% in adult PTLD related to EBV, but in the children it goes up to 8 to 10% because they are EBV seronegative, and it occurs in first 2 years following transplantation in 80% of the children, and mortality rate of PTLD is as high as 20%. So in this study what they did was they did EBV DNA level as well as they saw the number of CD8 plus HLA-DR plus cells. These are surrogate marker of immunity against EBV. If they are high, then there is high chances that patient can deal with EBV infection. So what they did was once the DNA was present, they decreased the dose of tacrolimus, and they again did the CD8 plus HLA-DR plus analysis and EBV DNA. And based on whether the HLA-DR plus CD8 plus cells were increasing, they modulated the immunosuppression. If the DNA increased to log 4, they stopped immunosuppression for some time and then again looked for the response. If it was less than log 2, then they continued with the same dose of CNI which they reduced. And if it was between log 2 to log 4, then the decision making was based on CD8 plus HLA-DR plus cells, and CNA dose was reduced if the CD8 plus HLA-DR cells were less. And with this strategy, there are 140 odd patients, and none of them had PTLD. And in those patients who were normal responders and chronic high load carriers, again they showed that CD8 plus HLA-DR plus cells were higher in normal responders, but in chronic high load carriers it was less. But at the end of the study, none of the patients developed PTLD. Now coming to another important topic of in liver transplantation, that is graft versus host disease. Although it is rare, but it is fatal in up to 85% of cases, and it produces lots of diagnostic dilemma. Although guidelines are there to diagnose it, but finally it comes down to immunophenotyping if there is a dilemma. So just in brief, what happens in graft versus host disease is the immune cells of the donor, it gets activated and then it attacks the cells in the recipient. So it's the other way around of rejection, and it affects in liver transplant. It never affects the liver because it is the graft. It affects the gut and skin most of the times. And this is just one of the study where they use immunophenotyping to look to diagnose graft versus host disease. And in this, clinical diagnosis was there, and then they compared the patients who had macrochimerism and positive and negative. So macrochimerism is when in the peripheral cells more than 1% cells are donor related, then it's called macro. If it is less than 1%, then it is called micro. So for diagnosis of GVHD, there should be a macrochimerism with more than 1% cells of donor origin, and that is obviously done by immunophenotyping. And as you can see, in 100% of cases with macrochimerism, the final diagnosis of GVHD was confirmed, and those in which macrochimerism was negative, none had GVHD. So this is the final diagnostic way of diagnosis of GVHD, but it is expensive and time consuming. Treatment has to be started before the report comes, and still it is fatal in 85% of the patients. Now this entity passenger lymphocyte syndrome used to be there. It is just milder form of GVHD where donor's B cells attack the red cells of the recipient, leading to picture of hemolysis. Initially it was not much reported, but now people have realized that the incidence of biochemical passenger lymphocyte syndrome can be around 30 to 40%. Most of the times it's mild, but can be severe. And the source of hemagglutinin is viable donor B lymphocytes passively transferred with the organ at the time of transplantation. And again, there is a use of immunophenotyping in this. This was one of the case reports where donor-derived alloantibody, there was a donor who was sensitized to multiple antibodies, and in liver recipient and pancreatic kidney recipient, this passenger lymphocyte syndrome occurred. And although in flow cytometry they could not find much changes, but in PCR they could see chimerism, and they finally diagnosed it. And both the patients survived. Now coming to another important where immunophenotyping is going to come in a big way, and that is immunosuppressive drug monitoring. At present, what we are doing is a very crude way of looking at it. We are looking at the blood level of the drugs. What drug is doing inside the body, we are not doing it. We are not knowing it. So obviously, it will have its own effect with higher immunosuppression leading to higher chances of infections and malignancy, or lower leading to higher chances of rejection. So some of the immunophenotyping methods used to have calcineurin, to look at calcineurin inhibitors action. That was one of the study where their activity of calcineurin pathway in patients on liver transplant wait list. So what they did was, these patients were not transplanted. They were in the waiting list, and then they were given tacrolimus single dose and look for what response occurs, because once a transplant is done, everything changes. So it was one of the better way of looking at it. So what they found out was, as the level of tacrolimus increased, IL-2 plus CD4 lymphocytes decreased. Similarly, IL-2 plus CD8 plus lymphocytes decreased. CD25 plus and CD4 plus lymphocytes decreased, and these were all in dose dependent manner. And CD25 plus CD8 plus lymphocytes again decreased. So what they postulated was, this is a better way of looking at how a tacrolimus level should be monitored. Obviously it's costly and not easily available, but gradually once the commercial kits become available, they will be much cheaper. Now another way of looking at tacrolimus activity, pharmacodynamic activity in body is to look for NF-κT-C1 amplification in T cells. What tacrolimus does is it inhibits this conversion of calcineurin and dephosphorylation of NF-κT-C1. So once this tacrolimus is given, this is inhibited, so it cannot translocate into nucleus and start forming this protein. There were 21 patients, 11, this was in a kidney transplant recipient. There were 21 patients, 11 were on tacrolimus and 10 were not on tacrolimus. And again they found out that CD4 plus CD28 plus T cells decreased with increasing level of TAC, and CD8 plus CD28 plus T cells decreased with TAC, but CD8 plus CD28 minus T cells, it was not significant. So again they postulated, these are very preliminary studies, but once it comes into use, then obviously it will become easily available. Now something more about post-transplant lymphoproliferative disorder. Organ transplantation can lead to post-transplant lymphoproliferative disorders as a result of immunosuppressive therapy. The incidence is 1 to 10%, and the patients on immunosuppression are 20 to 120-fold higher incidence of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And obviously they are very fatal disease. And there can be two types, B cell type and this T cell type. So what happens is when there EBV cytotoxic T cells, they attack the EBV infected B cells and they destroy them. But immunosuppression reduces them, and it can lead to polyclonal, then oligoclonal, then monoclonal differentiation. And at the organ level, again, there can be two types, donor B cell and donor antigen. So the recipient B cell activated by donor antigen, and they can produce PTLD of recipient origin, or donor B cell can be activated by recipient antigen and it will become a PTLD of donor origin. So there has been a classification, and obviously immunophenotyping has a big role in this. There are multiple types of PTLD, and the treatment protocol differs, and they are diagnosed by typically about how the lymphomas are diagnosed. So just how immunophenotyping can help in diagnosing PTLD, these are just two reports, not in liver transplant. One, they did a lymph node flow cytometry where they could diagnose PTLD at a very early stage, and bronchoalveolar lavage flow cytometry where they could diagnose PTLD at a very early stage. This is just to show that immunophenotype as a had a central role in diagnosing as well as managing PTLD. Now, how can we predict? I'm not going to details of acute rejection. Just can we predict rejection before it occurs? So this was a very good study published in Clinical Transplant where CD25, CD28, CD38 expressions were seen. And again, what they could see was the presence of if the CD28 was less than 45%, then the rejection-free patients were higher. Similarly, CD38 level was less than 30%, then rejection-free patients were higher. Although this was not statistically significant, but these were pre-transplant or just immediately after transplant, quite before the rejection episode occurred. So again, preemptively, if a patient is predisposed to rejection, then obviously immunosuppression can be increased. Now, there is this was an interesting paper where peripheral blood lymphocytes were used as a potential predictor of development of de novo malignancy. Malignancy is not only PTLD, but other malignancy is a big problem in long-term follow-up of liver transplant. These patients are on immunosuppression and they are predisposed to multiple types of malignancies. So what they did was they analyzed 134 non-cancer patients and 22 cancer patients who developed cancer after liver transplant. These are all liver transplant patients. So what they could find was age was one of the factors, but CD28 and CD38 plus cells with frequency of less than 40% had a odds ratio of 3.16. So that is also one of the things. If this kind of picture comes, then obviously immunosuppression has to be reduced and they should be kept on regular follow-up. This is a basic research stage, But obviously these things are going to come as the follow-up period of liver transplant patients increase and survival increase. Now coming to donor recipient matching, again the liver transplant is very different from other organ transplant. Liver is an immunoprivileged organ, and at this time point donor recipient matching doesn't have a role in liver transplant. You can't deny a person based on results of matching, HLA matching or cross matching, because it's a life-saving procedure and the incidence of adverse events is very low based on this. I'll just go through the literature what we have at this time point. So this was one of the UNOS database analysis where the impact of human leukocyte antigen donor and recipient serotyping and matching on liver transplant graft failure was seen. They have taken only patients who had autoimmune liver disease like primary sclerosing cholangitis, autoimmune hepatitis, and primary biliary cholangitis. These are patients who are more predisposed to rejections and more predisposed to immune attack. So they have taken these patients. The overall graft failure was on a long run was 38.6%. All the groups had similar 5-year graft survival. And as you can see, the causes of graft failure was almost similar except for disease recurrence, which was higher in PSC patients. But when they analyzed according to the HLA match, the degree of combined HLA mismatch and loci-specific A, B or DR mismatch did not significantly impact the risk of graft failure for any of the etiologies. And as you can see, whatever mismatch was there, there was no significant difference between all the groups. Similarly, this is also registry analysis, HLA antigen and adult living donor liver transplantation outcome. This is OPTN network database. And again, there was no significant association between time to graft failure and degree of donor recipient HLA match combined for A, B and DR loci considering 6 level of match. And again, there was no mismatch in those patients who were transplanted for autoimmune disease, and there was no effect of HLA matching on non-autoimmune disease. And again, there was no difference. Now coming to live donor liver transplantation, where there is an opportunity of matching because it is an elective case, unlike DDLT where graft is coming from somewhere else. So this was a study from Kyoto, Japan, 134 patients from 6 years, and again there was a lot of mismatch. The most common mismatch was one HLA mismatch. This was because most of the patients were related, and there was no significant difference between graft survival or overall survival between negative or positive cross match as well as HLA mismatch. But there are some papers we have emphasized that there can be a role, that this paper although published long back in 2010, but this selectively looked at patients who were retransplanted, and in retransplant they showed that if there was presence of HLA antibody, then the survival was less compared to, I think there is a mistake, it must be positive and negative. And HLA class 1 antibody in pediatric group, class 2 antibodies, overall DSA, class 1 DSA, class 2 DSA and anti-HLA antibodies to each class 2 loci had no effect. So only HLA1 antibody had an effect. So there was another paper in 2010 again, and it showed that there is a difference between positive and negative cross match. So they divided into 4 categories, although the number of patients were less. That was cross-match negative ABU identical, cross-match negative ABU incompatible, cross-match positive ABU incompatible, and cross-match positive but ABU identical. And interestingly, the survival was least with cross-match positive but ABU identical patients. But this is one of reported study. This was not replicated. It has been 10 years. People have been trying to do how to match recipient and donor, but there is no conclusive data till now. Now something new is there, that is de novo donor specific antibodies. Those who did not have donor specific antibody before transplant, but they developed it de novo. Multiple studies are there. I'm not going into detail. It's not related to immunophenotyping. I came across it, so I have just given it. So what they have shown that if a de novo donor specific antibody is there, there is a higher risk of rejection with odds ratio of 6.43. Again, there is a paper against it, but it's preformed donor specific antibodies, and even if there are donor specific antibodies preformed, it doesn't affect 1 year allograft survival in live donor liver transplantation. This was a study from Korea, 61 patients. And what they showed was the level of DSA decreased after liver transplantation. This might be because liver is a very big organ and it can accommodate lot of antibodies before they manifest as a clinical problem. And again they showed there was no difference. And one interesting paper came across was the cytokine concentration in regulatory T cells in live donor versus diseased donor. There has been debate that live donor doesn't require much immunosuppression, but again when we see the literature, there is not much literature. It's both. Sometimes they say diseased donor requires less immunosuppression, sometimes they say live donor requires some less immunosuppression. But in this they looked at the immunophenotyping, and they showed that the regulatory T cells, which are immunosuppressive cells, they are higher in live donor transplants, and IL-4 is again higher in live donor, which is an immunosuppressive cytokine. So they postulated that live donor will require less immunosuppression, but practically, although we have also seen, but our patient profile is a bit different from other centers where live donor transplant, the patients are much more preserved, but till now in literature there is no concrete difference in number of rejection episodes in live donor versus diseased donor. So this is one of the study on immunophenotyping. It deals with rejection. This was done by Dr. Pradeep under guidance of Dr. Nirupama and Dr. Pamecha, and this is under review. So here are 19 live donor transplant recipients undergoing liver biopsy for suspected rejection were enrolled, divided into two groups as a rejection group and no rejection group. 9 healthy subjects were also enrolled at control. They have done immunophenotyping and they have used the usual antibodies to look for multiple T cells and B cells. And most likely because the numbers were less, so the results have not come as one have thought, but some of the important findings are there. Although there was no difference in cells between rejection and no rejection group, this might be because the rejection group were also on immunosuppression and no rejection group was also on immunosuppression. They had taken samples at multiple time points. But there was significant difference between healthy control versus no rejection in central memory TH cells, central memory cytotoxic T cells, effector cytotoxic T cells, and activated regulatory T cells, plasmablast and memory B cells. And again there was some difference between healthy control versus rejection, and the final conclusion was because the numbers are less, so we can't make a concrete conclusion on this, but still this is a way forward and this is how the thing should go on. So in conclusion, immunophenotyping has multiple role in liver transplant. At this time point, donor and recipient matching has not attained decision changing status in liver transplant. And finally, future lies in individualized management of transplant recipients. One has to individualize in terms of immunosuppression, infection risk, treatment of infection, and then obviously the survival is going to be long. Thank you.